The phone rang at 9 in the evening. Mom's voice came through cold and sharp. She told me if I didn't invite my siblings to my wedding, she wouldn't come either. I felt my heart squeeze for just a moment, before something shifted inside me. I thought about the 3 weddings I'd been banned from, the family photos I was cropped out of, the years of being treated like I didn't belong. I took a breath and said the words that changed everything. "I'll miss you, Mom." Growing up in a family where I was the odd one out wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a slow, painful realization that crept up on me through childhood and settled into my bones by the time I hit my 20s. My name is Myra, and I'm the second of 4 children born to Patricia and Robert Henderson. We lived in a comfortable suburb outside Cincinnati, in one of those neighborhoods where everyone knew everyone, and keeping up appearances mattered more than I ever understood as a kid. My older brother Jason was the golden firstborn. He excelled at everything from academics to sports. He went to law school at Georgetown and became a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm in Chicago. He married Diane, whose family owned a chain of car dealerships across the Midwest. They lived in a sprawling house in the suburbs with perfectly manicured lawns and matching luxury cars in the driveway. My older sister Caroline came next. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made people turn their heads. Tall, blonde, always perfectly put together. She married Brett, a businessman who worked in commercial real estate development. They had a massive house in the suburbs of Columbus, complete with a pool and a 3-car garage. Caroline didn't work. She spent her days at the country club, planning charity galas, and posting perfectly filtered photos on social media. Then there was Amanda, my younger sister by 3 years. Amanda was the baby, the one Mom doted on constantly. She'd turned her looks and charm into a career as a social media influencer. She had over 200,000 followers on Instagram and made her living posting sponsored content about fashion, beauty, and lifestyle. She drove a white Range Rover that some athletic wear company had given her and lived in a trendy loft downtown. And then there was me. Myra, the artistic one, the dreamer, the disappointment. I became a middle school art teacher at a public school in a working-class neighborhood. I loved my job with every fiber of my being. I loved watching kids discover they could create something beautiful with their own hands. I loved the moment when a struggling student finally understood perspective or shading or color theory. I loved coming home with paint under my fingernails and chalk dust on my jeans. But my family saw it differently. They saw a low salary. They saw a modest apartment in an older building. They saw my 10-year-old Honda Civic with the dent in the back bumper. They saw someone who shopped at thrift stores and couldn't afford vacations to Europe. Dad understood. Robert Henderson was a high school English teacher himself before he retired. He'd always encouraged my art, attended every gallery showing I had, displayed my paintings in his home office. He told me that wealth came in many forms, and that the richest people he'd ever known measured their lives in moments, not money. Dad died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was 63. I was 27. And when he died, I lost the only person in my family who ever truly saw me. After Dad's funeral, things got worse. Without him there to buffer Mom's criticism or defend my choices, the family dynamic shifted. Mom stopped pretending to understand why I'd chosen teaching. She started making comments at every family, gathering about how worried she was about my future, how I should find a husband with a better job, since mine clearly wasn't going to support me, how I should have gone into business or law like Jason. The comparisons were constant. Why couldn't I be more like Caroline, who'd married well? Why couldn't I be more ambitious like Amanda, who'd turned her looks into a brand? Why did I insist on wasting my education on a job that paid so little? I tried to explain that I wasn't wasting anything, that I was happy, that fulfillment mattered more than a big house or a fancy car. But Mom would just shake her head like I was speaking a foreign language. My siblings picked up on Mom's attitude and amplified it. Jason would make jokes about my little teacher's salary at family dinners. Caroline would offer to take me shopping for better clothes, with a pitying look. Amanda would post photos of family gatherings on Instagram, and somehow I'd either be cropped out or strategically positioned behind someone else. The exclusion started small. Caroline didn't invite me to her Sweet 16 party when I was 13 because, according to Mom, the venue had limited space. Jason forgot my birthday 3 years in a row during college. Amanda made fun of my thrift store clothes in front of her friends. But the real betrayal started 8 years ago, when I was 24. Jason got engaged to Diane. I was genuinely excited for him. Despite everything, he was still my brother. I bought a dress from a department store clearance rack, saved up money for a gift, and arranged to take time off from my first year of teaching. 2 weeks before the wedding, Jason called me. His voice was stiff, formal, uncomfortable. He told me that he and Diane had to make some difficult decisions about the guest list. The venue had capacity limits. Diane's family was very traditional and had specific expectations, and unfortunately, they were going to have to uninvite a few people. I was one of them. I remember sitting on my apartment floor, phone pressed to my ear, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I asked him if he was serious. He said he was sorry, but yes. I told him I'd already bought a dress, already arranged time off work. He said he understood it was disappointing, but these things happened. Then he hung up. I cried for hours. I called Mom, hoping she'd intervene, hoping she'd tell Jason this was wrong. Instead, she told me I was being dramatic. That Jason's wedding day was about Jason and Diane, not about me. That I needed to be more understanding of how difficult wedding planning was. That I should send a nice gift and move on. The wedding happened. I saw the photos later on Facebook. 200 guests filled an elegant ballroom. The wedding party alone had 12 people. There was no capacity issue. There never had been. I found out the real reason months later from my cousin Sarah, who'd attended. Jason had told people at the reception that I was embarrassing because I didn't make enough money. That he didn't want me in the photos because I didn't fit the aesthetic he and Diane were going for. That having a public school teacher as a sister didn't exactly impress Diane's country club family. I wasn't in a single family photo from that day. Not one. It was as if I didn't exist. Mom knew. She'd known the whole time. And she'd taken Jason's side anyway. That was the moment I started to understand that my family didn't just misunderstand me. They were ashamed of me. 3 years after Jason's wedding, Caroline got engaged to Brett. By then, I was 27, more established in my teaching career, and cautiously hopeful that maybe things would be different this time. Maybe Caroline would be kinder than Jason. Maybe Mom would have learned something from how much Jason's exclusion had hurt me. I was wrong. Caroline called me 6 months before her wedding. She started the conversation with small talk, asking about my teaching, about my life. I let myself relax, thinking maybe this would be the moment we'd reconnect as sisters. Then she got to the point. She told me that her wedding had a very specific aesthetic. She'd hired a wedding planner who specialized in creating cohesive visual experiences. Every detail mattered, from the color palette to the dress code to the wedding party. And unfortunately, after careful consideration, she'd decided that I didn't fit the vibe she was going for. I asked her what that meant. She hesitated, then said that her wedding was going to be very elegant, very polished, very high-end. She needed everyone in the photos to reflect that. And with my lifestyle and my budget, she just didn't think I could pull off the look she needed. Translation: I wasn't thin enough, wasn't polished enough, wasn't wealthy enough to be in her wedding photos. I felt something break inside me. I asked her if she was seriously uninviting me because of how I looked. She got defensive. She said I was twisting her words. She said it wasn't personal. It was just about the wedding aesthetic. She said I should understand that her wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event, and she had the right to make it exactly what she wanted. I tried to talk to Mom again, Same response as before. It's Caroline's Day, Myra. Don't be selfish. Don't make this about you. The wedding happened on a Saturday in June. I spent that day alone in my apartment, watching bad movies and eating ice cream straight from the container. I cried until my eyes swelled shut. I looked at social media and saw the whole extended family there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends, everyone except me. Caroline's photos were stunning. She looked like a princess. The venue was gorgeous. Everything was perfect. And I wasn't in a single shot. 2 years ago, Amanda got engaged to Eric, a tech entrepreneur she'd met through her influencer network. Amanda's wedding was the biggest, most extravagant event of all. She planned a destination wedding at a vineyard in Napa Valley. 3 days of events, 150 guests, everything documented for her social media channels. This time, I didn't even wait to be uninvited. I knew it was coming. But Amanda still called to make it official 2 months before the wedding. Her words were casual, almost friendly, as if she were discussing the weather. Look, Myra, I need my wedding party to be Instagram perfect. You understand, right? My followers expect a certain aesthetic, and you're just not really on brand for me. No offense, but you don't really fit the influencer lifestyle. She actually said that. On brand. As if I were a product that didn't match her image. Then she offered to let me watch the ceremony via live stream, so you can still feel included. As if watching my sister's wedding on a computer screen while sitting alone in my apartment was some kind of generous compromise. I told her no thank you. I hung up. I didn't cry this time. I just felt numb. Mom called after Amanda's wedding, but not to ask how I was doing or to acknowledge that being excluded from 3 siblings' weddings might have hurt me. No. She called because she was angry that I hadn't sent a gift. I'd sent gifts to Jason's wedding and Caroline's wedding despite not being invited. I'd spent money I couldn't really afford on items from their registries because I'd been trying to prove I was still part of the family, that I still cared, that maybe if I was generous enough, kind enough, understanding enough, they'd eventually accept me. But after Amanda's wedding, I was done. I didn't send a gift, and Mom was furious. She told me I was being petty, that family sent gifts regardless of attendance, that I was embarrassing her by being so obviously bitter, that people would talk. That's when I realized something crucial. Mom didn't care about my feelings. She cared about how my feelings made her look. During those years of being excluded, while my siblings were building their picture-perfect lives and Mom was basking in their success, I was building something too. It just looked different. I'd formed close friendships with my fellow teachers. Grace taught English in the classroom next to mine. She was warm, hilarious, and completely unpretentious. She became my best friend. Marcus taught music and was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. He was gay, from a conservative family that had rejected him, and he understood what it felt like to be excluded by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. I'd also been pursuing my art more seriously. I painted on weekends, mostly landscapes and abstract pieces that explored themes of isolation and belonging. I'd had a few small gallery showings at local coffee shops and community centers. Nothing big, nothing that made money, but it fed my soul in ways my family never had. I also volunteered. Every Saturday morning, I taught free art classes to kids from low-income families at the community center downtown. It was there, surrounded by kids with paint-covered hands and bright smiles, that I met Daniel. He was volunteering too, teaching basic music lessons. He played guitar and piano and had the most genuine smile I'd ever seen. He was patient with the kids, encouraging, never condescending. He worked as a sound engineer at a recording studio during the week, but he spent his weekends giving back to the community. We started talking during volunteer sessions. Then we started getting coffee afterward. Then dinner. Then he was my boyfriend, and then he was my best friend. And then I couldn't imagine my life without him. Daniel came from a completely different kind of family. His parents, Linda and George, were warm and welcoming from the moment we met. His sister Emily treated me like I'd always been part of their family. They had Sunday dinners together every week. They laughed at each other's jokes. They supported each other's dreams, even when those dreams were unconventional. Being with Daniel's family was like discovering that family dinners didn't have to be competitions, that love didn't have to be earned, that acceptance could be freely given. 1 month after Amanda's wedding, my Aunt Helen reached out to me. Helen was Dad's younger sister. She'd always been kind to me, but we weren't particularly close. She lived in Denver, and I only saw her at major family events. She called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was gentle but serious. She told me she'd been wanting to reach out for years, but hadn't known how. She told me she'd been cut off from most of the family too, specifically because she'd taken my side. Then she told me something that changed everything. She'd been at all 3 of my siblings' weddings, and at each one, they'd actively mocked me. Jason had done an impression of me at his reception, making fun of my poor teacher's salary and pretending to count pennies. Caroline had told guests that I was too jealous to attend because I was still single and couldn't handle seeing her happiness. Amanda had posted on her private Instagram account, the one just for close friends, that I was the family embarrassment and that she was glad I wasn't there to ruin her aesthetic. Helen had screenshots. She had recordings. She had proof. She sent me everything. I sat in my apartment reading through messages, looking at photos, listening to audio clips, and I felt something inside me die. The last tiny hope I'd been holding on to, the hope that maybe this was all just miscommunication or thoughtlessness, evaporated completely. The exclusion wasn't passive. It wasn't just about venue capacity or aesthetics or guest lists. It was cruel. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And Mom had known. Helen showed me text messages between Mom and my siblings. Messages where Mom encouraged them not to invite me if I brought down the energy. Messages where she laughed along with their jokes about me. Messages where she called me overly sensitive and a burden. My own mother. The woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally. The woman who was supposed to protect me. She'd encouraged my siblings to exclude me. She'd participated in mocking me. She'd chosen them over me, again and again and again. I thanked Helen for telling me the truth. I told her I needed time to process. Then I sat alone in my apartment and grieved for the family I'd never actually had. 1 year ago, when I was 31, I made a decision that changed my life. I decided to stop trying to earn my family's love. I decided to stop shrinking myself to fit into their world. I decided to stop waiting for them to see my worth. I blocked my siblings on social media. All of them. I went low contact with Mom, responding to her messages only when absolutely necessary and keeping conversations brief and surface level. I stopped attending family gatherings unless Dad's side of the family would be there, and even then, I kept my distance from Mom, Jason, Caroline, and Amanda. Instead, I focused entirely on my own happiness. I threw myself into teaching, into my art, into my friendships, into my relationship with Daniel. I stopped apologizing for my choices. I stopped feeling ashamed of my modest apartment and my old car and my thrift store clothes. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. Daniel and I had been dating for 3 years when he proposed. It happened 6 months ago, at the community center where we'd met. He'd arranged it so all our students were there, along with Grace and Marcus and our other close friends. He got down on one knee, surrounded by kids with paint on their faces and instruments in their hands, and he asked me to marry him. I said yes, before he even finished the question. The ring was simple, a small diamond on a gold band. It had belonged to his grandmother. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. I was joining a family that actually wanted me. We started planning our wedding immediately. We wanted something small and intimate. 75 guests at a garden venue just outside the city. Budget-friendly but elegant. Focused on love and community, rather than impressing anyone. Daniel's family was thrilled. Linda cried happy tears and hugged me for 5 minutes straight. George shook Daniel's hand and told him he'd chosen well. Emily immediately started planning the bachelorette party. I didn't tell my family right away. I wanted to hold on to the happiness for a little while before they inevitably tried to taint it. But word got out anyway. A mutual family friend saw my engagement announcement on Facebook before I'd blocked everyone and mentioned it to Caroline at some event. Caroline called me 2 days later. Her voice was suddenly warm, friendly, congratulatory. She asked about the proposal, about the ring, about our plans. She seemed genuinely interested. I felt that old, familiar hope creeping back in. Maybe this could be a turning point. Maybe the engagement would bring us together. Maybe they'd finally accept me. We talked for 20 minutes. It was the longest pleasant conversation Caroline and I had had in years. Then she asked when she'd receive her invitation. My stomach dropped. I'd been so caught up in the moment that I'd forgotten the inevitable question was coming. I took a breath and told her gently that Daniel and I were keeping the wedding very small, immediate family only, that we had a limited budget and a limited guest list. The change in her tone was instant. The warmth vanished. Her voice went cold and sharp. "You're seriously not inviting your own sister? After everything we've been through?" I pointed out as calmly as I could that she hadn't invited me to her wedding, that none of my siblings had, that I'd been excluded from 3 family weddings, and I was simply making the same choice for mine. Her response made my blood boil. "That was different, Myra. My wedding was expensive. We had to make cuts. You can't seriously still be hung up on that." Then she said something that revealed everything. "Besides, Mom said you'd understand." There it was. Mom had orchestrated the exclusions. Mom had told them it was okay to leave me out. Mom had given them permission to treat me as less than. Caroline kept talking. "Look, I know we haven't been close, but family is family. And honestly, it would look really bad for us if people knew you excluded us from your wedding. What would people think?" That's what she cared about. Not healing our relationship. Not celebrating my happiness. Just appearances. Just what people would think. I asked her a simple question. "Did it look bad when you excluded me 3 times? She actually laughed. "Oh my God, Myra, you're still so sensitive about that. It was years ago. Get over it." Then came the threat. "Mom's not going to like this. You know she'll take our side. She always does." I felt something snap inside me. Some last thread of obligation or guilt or familial duty just broke clean through. I told Caroline I was sorry she felt that way, but my decision was final. She was not invited to my wedding. Neither was Jason, neither was Amanda. I was marrying into a family that actually loved me, and I wanted my wedding day to be filled with people who genuinely wanted to be there. She hung up on me. 3 minutes later, my phone started ringing. Jason. Jason used his lawyer voice. Calm, measured, designed to make me feel like I was being irrational. He told me that Caroline had called him, very upset, saying I was refusing to invite any of my siblings to my wedding. He said he was concerned about me, that this didn't seem like me. That Dad would be so disappointed to see me tearing the family apart like this. That last part made me see red. Using Dad, the one person who'd actually loved me, as emotional manipulation, was a new low even for Jason. I told him the truth. That Dad would be disappointed in how they'd treated me for the past 8 years. That Dad would be ashamed of them for excluding me, mocking me, and treating me like an embarrassment. That Dad had valued kindness and integrity above all else, qualities none of them had shown me in years. Jason's calm facade cracked. He raised his voice. He said he didn't remember uninviting me from his wedding, that I was misremembering, that I was being overly emotional and distorting the past to play the victim. Gaslighting. He was actually trying to gaslight me about something he'd done 8 years ago. I told him I had the receipts, that Aunt Helen had sent me screenshots and messages proving everything, that I knew what they'd said about me at their weddings, That I knew Mom had encouraged them to exclude me. He went silent. Then he said, Aunt Helen should mind her own business. I hung up. Within an hour, Amanda sent a long text message. It was carefully crafted, playing the victim in that way she'd perfected for her social media audience. She said she couldn't believe I was being so cruel, that she'd looked up to me as her big sister, and now I was punishing her for minor misunderstandings from years ago. That family was supposed to forgive each other. Then came the threat. She said if I didn't invite her, she'd post about it on social media, that her 200,000 followers should know how I treated family, that she'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I didn't respond. I just took screenshots of her messages, saved them, and blocked her number. That evening, Mom called. I'd been expecting it, dreading it, but also, in a strange way, ready for it. Her voice was ice. Pure anger with no attempt to hide it. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing. She said I was embarrassing the entire family. She said people were already talking about what a vindictive, petty person I was. She said my siblings had done nothing wrong and I was holding grudges like a child. I tried to speak, but she talked over me. She listed everything my siblings had accomplished. Jason's successful law career, Caroline's beautiful home, Amanda's social media following. Then she asked what I'd accomplished. Teaching kids to finger paint, living in a tiny apartment, driving a car from 2008. She said I was jealous, that I'd always been jealous of them, that I couldn't handle their success, so I was trying to ruin their relationships with me to make myself feel better. Then she issued her ultimatum. She told me I had 1 week to send formal invitations to Jason, Caroline, and Amanda, along with their spouses and children. That was 15 additional people. On my 75-person guest list, that would mean cutting 15 friends or members of Daniel's family. I told her no. She said, then I'm not coming either. She expected me to panic, to beg, to crumble. That's what I would have done a year ago, even 6 months ago. But I'd changed. I'd grown. I'd learned that love shouldn't come with conditions. That family shouldn't be a constant negotiation of worth. The words came out calm and clear. I'll miss you, Mom. Silence. Complete silence on the other end of the phone. I could hear her breathing, hear her trying to process what I'd just said. You don't mean that, she finally said. I do. I've missed you for years while I was standing right here, trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough for you. 1 more day won't make a difference. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, and I won't be there. No, Mom, I don't think I will. I hung up. Then I cried. Not from sadness exactly, from release. From finally saying the things I'd needed to say for so long. From finally standing up for myself. Daniel held me. He'd been in the room during the call, had heard every word. He told me I was the bravest person he knew, that he was proud of me, that his family would fill every seat with love. 30 minutes later, Daniel's mom, Linda, called. She said Emily had told her what happened. She said she wanted me to know that she considered me her daughter now, that she'd be sitting in the front row at my wedding with bells on, that I'd never be alone again. I cried harder, but this time they were tears of gratitude. Over the next few days, I blocked Mom's number. I blocked all my siblings' numbers. I changed my social media to private, keeping only people I trusted. I sent a message to extended family, explaining that I was having a small, intimate wedding and couldn't accommodate everyone, but that I appreciated their well wishes. Some relatives understood immediately. Aunt Helen sent a beautiful message of support. A few cousins from Dad's side reached out with encouragement, but others were shocked. Some sent messages asking what had happened, clearly having heard Mom's version of events. Then, 1 week after Mom's ultimatum, Aunt Helen called with urgent news. Mom had sent a family-wide email to every aunt, uncle, and cousin in our extended family. Helen forwarded it to me. I read it 3 times, each time feeling sicker. The email painted me as mentally unstable, cruel, and vindictive. Mom wrote that I'd always struggled with jealousy and was finally showing my true colors by excluding my loving siblings from my wedding. She claimed I'd been difficult my entire life, that she'd tried everything to help me, but that I refused to accept responsibility for my actions. Then came the worst part. Mom claimed I'd stolen money from her, a complete fabrication. She said I'd borrowed $5,000 for a car repair and never paid her back, and that now I was spending money on a wedding while still owing her. It was a total lie. I'd never borrowed money from her. I'd never asked her for anything. Mom ended the email by asking family members to boycott my wedding, to show me that actions had consequences, to teach me that you can't treat family this way without repercussions. I stared at my phone, reading and rereading the email. My character was being destroyed. My reputation in the extended family was being demolished based on complete lies. Several relatives believed her. I started receiving angry messages. An uncle I barely knew called me ungrateful. A second cousin said I should be ashamed of myself. Even some of Dad's relatives, who didn't know me well, sent disappointed messages. I felt sick, panicked, like the walls were closing in. But then Aunt Helen called again. She'd replied all to Mom's email. She attached every screenshot, every message, every piece of evidence she'd collected over the years. Proof of my siblings' cruelty, proof of their mocking, proof of the deliberate exclusions, proof of Mom's participation and encouragement. Helen's email was clear and direct. She wrote that the only person who should be ashamed was Mom, that Mom had raised 3 bullies and enabled them every step of the way, that Mom had chosen to alienate one child to please the others, that she'd destroyed her relationship with her daughter through years of emotional abuse. Helen wrote that I was the only one in the family with integrity, that I'd been kind and generous despite years of mistreatment, that I'd sent gifts to weddings I wasn't invited to, tried to maintain relationships with people who mocked me, and continued to show up for a family that never showed up for me. She ended by saying she was honored to attend my wedding, and that anyone who chose to boycott it was showing their true character. The email thread exploded. Dozens of responses, heated arguments, family members taking sides. Several relatives reached out to apologize to me directly. Cousins I'd grown up with said they'd had no idea how bad things had been. Aunts and uncles expressed shock at what my siblings had said about me. Some said they'd noticed I was always absent from events, but had assumed I was busy, not that I'd been deliberately excluded. Others defended Mom, said I was twisting things, said family was family and I should forgive and move on, said Helen was stirring up drama. The family fractured. Lines were drawn. But to my surprise, more people sided with me than I'd expected. Aunt Helen became my fiercest advocate, and I realized I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. 3 months before the wedding, I thought the worst of the drama was over. I'd cut contact with Mom and my siblings. I'd clarified the situation with extended family. Daniel and I had finalized most of the wedding plans. I was focusing on the positive, on the celebration ahead, on starting my life with someone who truly loved me. I should have known they wouldn't let it go that easily. The first incident happened on a Tuesday. Our wedding venue, a small garden estate just outside the city, called me at work. The owner, a kind woman named Margaret, sounded concerned. She told me they'd received an anonymous complaint about safety violations at their property. Health department and fire marshal had to come inspect before they could host any more events. Margaret assured me it was probably nothing, just someone being petty, but she was legally required to have the inspections done. Our wedding was in 3 months. If the inspections dragged on, we might lose our date. I felt my stomach drop. I asked if she had any idea who'd filed the complaint. She said it was anonymous, but the timing was suspicious. The complaint had been filed the day after I'd finalized our contract and made the final payment. The inspections happened the following week. They found nothing wrong. The venue was up to code on every single regulation. Margaret got her clearance, and our wedding was back on. But she pulled me aside afterward and said she'd been doing this for 15 years and had never received a complaint like that before. She suspected someone in my life was trying to sabotage the wedding. I knew exactly who it was. 2 weeks later, my photographer called. Heather was a young woman just starting her business, and we'd gotten an incredible deal because she was building her portfolio. She told me, voice shaking with confusion, that she'd received an email from my account canceling our contract. Except I hadn't sent any email. I immediately called her back and explained. Someone had created a fake email address that looked almost identical to mine, just one letter different, and sent her a cancellation notice. Heather had almost booked another wedding for our date before thinking to call and confirm. We secured everything with passwords and security questions. Heather was rattled, but agreed to keep our contract. The same thing happened with our florist 3 days later. Another fake cancellation email. Someone was actively trying to ruin my wedding. Daniel's brother Jake worked in IT security. We asked him to investigate. He traced the fake emails back to an IP address. After some digging, he found it belonged to Amanda. My little sister, the social media influencer, was cyberstalking me and trying to sabotage my wedding day. We had proof, digital evidence that could hold up in court. Daniel wanted to press charges immediately. His parents agreed. Even Grace and Marcus, who'd been supportive throughout everything, thought we should involve the police. I was tempted. God, I was so tempted. To watch Amanda face real consequences for once. To see her perfect online image shattered. To make her feel a fraction of what I'd felt for years. But I didn't do it. Instead, I documented everything. I saved every fake email, every trace Jake had found, every piece of evidence. I put it all in a folder and stored it safely. Then I changed every single vendor password. I added 2-factor authentication to everything. I made our wedding information private and shared the venue location only with people I trusted completely. I chose peace over revenge, but I wasn't naive. I knew this meant they weren't done. 2 weeks later, Caroline's husband Brett reached out to me. We'd never been particularly close. He was always polite at family events, but distant. I was surprised when his name showed up on my phone. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Said he had something important to tell me. His voice sounded strained, tired. We met at a cafe halfway between our towns. Brett looked different than I remembered. Older, worn down. He ordered a black coffee and got straight to the point. He apologized for how Caroline had treated me. He said he'd been complicit by staying silent, and he regretted it. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said Caroline was miserable in their marriage. That she'd married him for his money and status, not for love. That she was jealous of my relationship with Daniel because ours was real and hers was a performance. That she spent her days shopping and posting on social media to fill the emptiness. He said he was planning to file for divorce. That he couldn't do it anymore. Then he warned me. He told me that Mom, Caroline, and Amanda had been meeting regularly, planning something. He didn't know the details because Caroline had been secretive, taking phone calls in other rooms, having hushed conversations that stopped when he entered. But he'd overheard enough to know they were planning to show up at my wedding uninvited. They were planning to cause a scene, to make a spectacle, to ruin my day the way they felt I'd ruined theirs by excluding them. Brett felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. He wanted me to be prepared. I thanked him, told him I hoped he found happiness in whatever came next, and immediately hired security for my wedding. It felt ridiculous. Hiring security to keep my own family out of my wedding, but it was necessary. I gave the security guard photos of Mom, Jason, Caroline, and Amanda. I told him they were not to be allowed on the property under any circumstances. I made the venue address private. I told guests not to share any information on social media until after the event. I created a wedding website with a password that only trusted guests received. It felt extreme. It felt like I was being paranoid. But then, 1 month before the wedding, Jason proved that no precaution was too much. He showed up at my school. I was walking to my car after a long day of teaching, keys in hand, thinking about dinner, when I saw him leaning against a black Mercedes in the parking lot. My stomach lurched. I hadn't seen him in person in over a year. He straightened when he saw me, walked toward me with that confident stride he'd always had. I stopped walking, maintaining distance between us. He wasn't apologetic. He was angry. "You've poisoned the family against us," he said, voice sharp. "Cousins won't talk to us anymore. Aunt Helen has turned everyone against us. This is all your fault." I felt oddly calm, like I was watching the scene from outside my body. "I didn't poison anyone, Jason. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. We're your family. You owe us forgiveness. You owe us an invitation to your wedding." "No," I said simply. "I don't." He stepped closer. "You had years to get over this. You're being vindictive and cruel, and you know it. You had years to apologize. You chose cruelty instead." His jaw clenched. Then he reached out and grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me from walking away. "You're going to regret this," he said, voice low and threatening. Suddenly, Daniel was there. I hadn't even seen him arrive, but he must have been picking me up from work. He stepped between Jason and me, breaking his grip on my arm. "Touch her again," Daniel said, voice deadly calm, "and I'm calling the police." Jason looked at Daniel, seemed to calculate his options, then backed off. But not before one last threat. "This isn't over, Myra. You think you can just cut us out and there won't be consequences? You're making the biggest mistake of your life." School security had seen the confrontation and was already approaching. They escorted Jason off campus while I stood there shaking. Daniel held me, asked if I was okay, told me we should file a police report. We did. The next day, I filed for a restraining order against Jason. The judge granted a temporary order based on the threatening behavior and physical contact. Jason was legally required to stay away from me, my workplace, and my home. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Daniel and cried. Not from fear, exactly, but from the surreal horror of needing legal protection from my own brother. Grace came over with wine. Marcus brought comfort food. We sat together, and my friends reminded me that I had a family. It just wasn't the one I'd been born into. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Grace showed me something on her phone. Amanda had posted an Instagram story, just a photo of a sunset with text overlay. It said, "Some people don't deserve happiness. Karma's coming." She'd deleted it within an hour, but Grace had taken a screenshot. I stared at that message and felt ice run through my veins. They weren't going to let me have my wedding day in peace. They were going to try to destroy it. I made the decision then. The venue location would remain completely private until the morning of the wedding. Only our closest friends and Daniel's family would have the address in advance. Everyone else would receive it the day of, giving my family no time to plan an ambush. It felt like preparing for war instead of a wedding. But I'd learned that when people show you who they are, you should believe them. The morning of my wedding, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window of the hotel room where I'd stayed with Grace and my bridesmaids. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Grace brought me coffee and a bagel. My bridesmaids, all fellow teachers who'd become my chosen sisters, helped me with my hair and makeup. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and excitement. No criticism, no comparisons, just love. The venue was a 30-minute drive away. We'd rented a small shuttle to transport the bridal party. As we drove through the countryside, I watched the landscape pass by and thought about how different this day was from what I'd once imagined. I'd always pictured my family at my wedding, Mom helping me into my dress, Caroline fixing my hair, Amanda posting excited stories on Instagram, Dad walking me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. But Dad was gone. and the rest of them had made their choices long ago. The venue was more beautiful than I remembered. The garden was in full bloom with late spring flowers. White chairs were arranged in neat rows facing an arch covered in climbing roses. String lights were already hung for the evening reception. Everything was simple, elegant, and perfect. Our 75 guests would start arriving in an hour. The final count was split almost evenly. Daniel's family and friends on one side, my friends, fellow teachers, former students, and a handful of supportive relatives on the other. Aunt Helen was flying in from Denver and had texted that morning that she'd arrived safely and couldn't wait. Getting ready in the bridal suite, I looked at myself in the mirror. The dress was simple, ivory-colored with lace sleeves and a flowing skirt. I'd bought it from a small boutique and had made some modifications myself, adding embroidered details that reflected my artistic style. It wasn't designer. It probably cost a tenth of what Caroline's dress had. But it was mine, and I felt beautiful in it. Grace stood beside me, already dressed in her deep blue bridesmaid dress. "You look stunning," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for being here," I told her. "For being my sister when my own wouldn't." She hugged me carefully, mindful of makeup and hair, always. There was a knock on the door. Linda, Daniel's mom, came in holding a small blue velvet box. Her eyes were already red from crying happy tears. "I wanted to give you this before the ceremony," she said, opening the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with tiny charms. It was my grandmother's. She wore it at her wedding. I wore it at mine. And now I want you to have it. I felt tears threatening. "Linda, I can't. This is a family heirloom." "Exactly," she said, fastening it around my wrist. "And you're family now, officially." That's when I lost it. I cried, and Linda cried, and Grace grabbed tissues for both of us while laughing at the emotional mess we'd become. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. By 3:30, guests were arriving. I watched from the bridal suite window as people found their seats, as Daniel's large extended family filled their side, as my smaller but equally enthusiastic group filled mine. Aunt Helen arrived in a vibrant purple dress, looking fierce and proud. She waved up at my window. A few of my favorite students, now in high school, came with their parents. Marcus was playing soft guitar music as people arrived. The whole scene felt warm, intimate, chosen. At 3:45, the wedding coordinator came to tell me everyone was seated, and we were ready to begin. My bridesmaids lined up. Grace gave me one last hug. Then we began the walk down to the ceremony site. The music changed. Everyone stood. I stepped out from behind the garden wall where I'd been waiting, and there, at the end of the aisle, was Daniel. He was wearing a simple gray suit, his eyes already shining with tears, and the smile on his face was the most genuine thing I'd ever seen. This man loved me, completely, unconditionally, exactly as I was. Aunt Helen had agreed to walk me down the aisle, representing Dad's side of the family. She took my arm, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "Your father would be so proud of you." We walked down the aisle together. I looked at the faces of the people who'd come, real smiles, happy tears, people who were genuinely glad to be there, people who'd chosen to show up for me. The ceremony was beautiful. The officiant, a friend of Daniel's family, spoke about chosen family and the courage it takes to love authentically. Daniel and I had written our own vows. Mine talked about finding home in a person rather than a place, about learning that love shouldn't require you to shrink yourself, about building something real together. His talked about watching me be brave, about admiring my strength, about promising to always be the person who shows up. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. When the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," and Daniel pulled me close, I heard cheering and applause and felt something I'd never felt at a family gathering before. I felt celebrated. I felt seen. I felt loved. The reception began immediately after the ceremony. Tables were arranged under the string lights. Food was served family style. The dress code had been garden casual, which meant people were comfortable and relaxed. No stuffy formality, no performance, just celebration. During dinner, Daniel's best man gave a funny, heartfelt speech about their friendship. Grace's maid of honor speech mentioned my strength, how I'd overcome family hardship to build a life I was proud of. She didn't name names, but the guests who knew understood. She raised her glass. To chosen family being just as important as blood. To Myra, who taught me what real courage looks like. The toast made me cry again. Happy tears this time. We cut the cake. We danced. Daniel's nieces and nephews ran around the garden, their laughter filling the air. The photographer captured moments of genuine joy. Everything felt perfect. And then, just after 8 o'clock, as the sun was setting and we were about to do our first dance, there was a commotion at the entrance. The security guard's voice came through his radio to our coordinator. 3 people were at the gate, trying to get in. They claimed to be family. They didn't have invitations. It was Mom, Caroline, and Amanda. My heart started racing. Daniel saw my face change and immediately asked what was wrong. The coordinator approached discreetly and told me the situation. She asked what I wanted to do. For a moment, I was frozen. Part of me wanted to hide. Part of me wanted to run. But then I looked around at the people who'd shown up for me. At Aunt Helen, who'd risked family relationships to tell me the truth. At Grace and Marcus, who'd held me through tears. At Linda and George, who'd welcomed me without hesitation. At Daniel, who'd stood beside me through everything. I'd spent my whole life being afraid of confrontation with my family. Afraid of disappointing them. Afraid of not being enough. I was done being afraid. I'll talk to them, I told the coordinator. Daniel immediately said he was coming with me. Grace stood up too, ready to support me. But I told them to stay, to keep the party going. I didn't want my guests' evening ruined by this. I walked to the entrance alone. The security guard had kept Mom, Caroline, and Amanda at the gate. They couldn't see the reception from there, couldn't see our guests, or the celebration. They saw me approaching in my wedding dress, and Mom's face immediately shifted into what I recognized as her concerned mother expression. She reached her arms out toward me. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I changed my mind. I couldn't miss my daughter's wedding. Please, let us in. But I noticed immediately that her apology wasn't real. I saw Caroline holding up her phone, filming. I saw Amanda already typing on her phone, probably crafting an Instagram post about being blocked from her own sister's wedding. They weren't there because they loved me or regretted their choices. They were there for content, for sympathy, for their narrative. This was a performance for their audience, a chance to play the victims. I stopped about 10 feet away from them, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain distance. You're not here because you love me, I said quietly. You're here because you can't stand that I'm happy without you. Mom's face shifted. The mask slipped. That's not true. I'm your mother. Of course I love you. A mother shows up when it matters. You chose them over me for years. I'm just returning the favor. Caroline lowered her phone slightly. You're really going to do this? You're really going to keep your own family out of your wedding? You kept me out of 3, I said simply. That was different. Caroline's voice rose. We had reasons, we explained. So do I. My reason is that I want my wedding day to be filled with people who actually care about me. You've proven you're not those people. Amanda finally looked up from her phone, where she'd been frantically typing. We're your family. You can't just decide we don't count. Yes, I can. Family isn't just biology. It's behavior. It's showing up. It's loving people even when they don't meet your standards, or fit your aesthetic, or make enough money to impress your friends. I took a breath. My voice was steady, calm. Years of hurt had built to this moment, and I wasn't going to waste it on screaming or crying. Family doesn't exclude you and then demand inclusion. Family doesn't mock you and then expect forgiveness. Family doesn't sabotage your wedding and then show up playing victim. Mom tried one last manipulation. Her voice went cold, hard. Your father would be ashamed of you right now. It was the worst thing she could have said. Using Dad, the only one who'd ever truly loved me, as a weapon. But this time, it didn't work. No, Mom. Dad would be proud of me for finally standing up to you. He'd be proud that I chose happiness over obligation. He'd be proud that I built a life filled with people who actually love me. I turned to the security guard. Please escort them off the property. Mom's face went red. You're going to regret this. When you come crawling back, I won't be there. I know, I said. That's the point. Caroline started arguing, voice rising. Amanda was definitely filming now, probably live streaming the whole thing for her followers, but I was already walking away. As I headed back to the reception, I heard them protesting, heard the security guard firmly but politely escorting them to their cars. Their voices faded into the distance. When I returned to the garden, the music was still playing. Daniel was waiting near the edge of the reception area, concern all over his face. Grace and Marcus were nearby, ready to support me if I needed it. But when I reached Daniel, I was smiling. Not a forced smile, a real one. Are you okay? He asked. I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. Then something unexpected happened. Our guests, who'd noticed me leaving and returning, began to stand, slowly at first, then all at once. They gave me a standing ovation. These people, this chosen family, were applauding me for standing up for myself. Aunt Helen was crying openly. Linda was beaming with pride. My former students were cheering. Grace was pumping her fist in the air. I felt something I'd never felt at a family gathering before. I felt celebrated for being strong rather than criticized for being difficult. Daniel took my hand. Ready for our first dance? Absolutely. We walked to the center of the dance floor. The song that played was one Dad used to sing around the house when I was little. A gentle, old-fashioned love song about building a life together. I'd requested it specifically to honor him, to keep his memory present on this day. As Daniel and I swayed together, I looked around at the faces watching us. Every single person there had chosen to show up for me, had chosen to celebrate me, had chosen to love me exactly as I was. And I realized something profound. I hadn't lost my family by setting boundaries. I'd finally found my real one. The rest of the evening was pure joy. We danced until our feet hurt. We laughed until our faces ached. Aunt Helen told stories about Dad, keeping his memory alive and making everyone laugh. Daniel's dad gave an impromptu speech about how proud he was to have me as a daughter-in-law. My students presented us with a painting they'd all worked on together, a collaborative piece showing two trees with intertwined roots. By the time the last guest left around midnight, I was exhausted and happier than I'd ever been. The drama at the gate felt like a distant memory. What mattered was the celebration, the love, the people who'd actually shown up. Daniel and I stood alone in the garden, string lights still twinkling above us, and he pulled me close. Best day of my life, he whispered. Mine too, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I'd won, not by revenge or retaliation, but by choosing happiness, by choosing myself, by finally understanding that I was worth showing up for. The honeymoon was simple and perfect. Daniel and I spent a week in a small coastal town in Maine. We walked on beaches, ate fresh seafood, explored little art galleries, and just enjoyed being together without any drama or stress. It was exactly what we needed. When we returned home to our apartment, there were dozens of messages waiting, some from wedding guests thanking us for a beautiful celebration, some from extended family members sharing their thoughts about what had happened at the gate. The reactions were mixed, but mostly supportive. A few relatives had cut ties with Mom and my siblings after witnessing the wedding gate crash. Others remained neutral, trying to stay out of what they saw as family drama. but to my surprise, more people sided with me than I'd expected. Aunt Helen told me later that Mom's social standing in the family had taken a serious hit. Her behavior was finally being seen for what it was. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel vindicated in a spiteful way. I just felt free. Daniel and I settled into married life. Our apartment that had once felt cramped now felt cozy with both of us in it. We filled it with wedding photos. Real smiles, genuine laughter, moments of pure joy. Looking at those pictures, you'd never know there had been any family conflict. You'd just see two people surrounded by love. My art career continued to flourish. 3 months after the wedding, I had my second gallery show. This one sold out completely. A collector from New York bought one of my larger pieces for $15,000. I was shocked, Daniel cried. We celebrated by going to the same diner where we'd had our first date. I kept teaching because I loved it. The money from my art sales helped ease financial stress, but my classroom was still where my heart was. My students needed me, and I needed them. Watching kids discover their creative voices gave me purpose beyond anything money could buy. Daniel's family continued to embrace me fully. Sunday dinners became a regular tradition. Linda taught me her grandmother's recipes. George helped us fix up our apartment. Emily and I became close, texting daily and meeting for coffee every week. I'd never experienced unconditional family love before. It was overwhelming in the best way. 6 months after the wedding, something unexpected happened. Caroline reached out. She didn't call or text. Instead, she sent a message through a mutual cousin, asking if I'd be willing to meet her for coffee. No pressure, no expectations, just a conversation. I was hesitant. Daniel was skeptical. Grace told me to trust my instincts. Aunt Helen said the choice was mine, but that I should protect my peace above all else. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I agreed, but with clear boundaries. We'd meet in a public place. We'd have a time limit of 1 hour, and if at any point I felt uncomfortable or manipulated, I'd leave. We met at a cafe downtown on a Saturday morning. Caroline looked different. Her hair was less perfectly styled. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She looked smaller somehow, less polished, more human. She thanked me for coming. Then she apologized. It wasn't like her apologies in the past, the ones that were really excuses or attempts to manipulate. This one seemed genuine. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking since the wedding, that watching me stand up for myself had forced her to examine her own life, that she'd realized how much of her existence had been performance. She told me she'd filed for divorce from Brett, that their marriage had been empty for years, built on status and appearances rather than love, that seeing the genuine connection between Daniel and me at the wedding, even from outside the gate, had made her realize what she'd been missing. She admitted she'd been jealous of me, not of my money or my career, but of my authenticity, my ability to be myself without apology, my willingness to choose happiness over approval. She said Mom had raised them to value the wrong things: success over kindness, appearance over substance, status over integrity. And she was finally starting to see how toxic that had been. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I told her I appreciated the apology, that I could see she was being sincere. But I also told her the truth. I forgive you, Caroline, but I don't want a relationship right now. Maybe someday, but not yet. The hurt is still too fresh, and I need to protect the peace I've finally found. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, and I'm sorry. We finished our coffee. I wished her well with her divorce and her journey toward a more authentic life. Then I left, and I felt okay. Not happy, not sad, just okay. Jason never apologized. I heard through family that he was furious about the wedding, that he blamed me for causing division in the family, that he maintained he'd done nothing wrong. He was still playing the victim. still refusing to take accountability. I felt nothing when I heard about his continued bitterness. No anger, no hurt, just a kind of peaceful indifference. That's when I knew I'd truly healed. Amanda's attempt at redemption was less sincere. Her sabotage attempts came to light publicly when someone, probably someone who'd been at the wedding and knew the story, leaked the evidence to some of her brand sponsors. She lost several partnerships. Her follower count dropped as people realized she wasn't the person she pretended to be online. She posted a public apology video a few months later. It was clearly scripted, clearly designed to salvage her reputation rather than take genuine responsibility. She cried on camera, talked about being in a dark place, used all the right buzzwords about growth and healing. I didn't watch it. Daniel sent me the link, but I deleted it without clicking. I didn't need to see it. Her apology wasn't for me. It was for her audience, her sponsors, her image. Mom made one final attempt about a year after the wedding. She sent a handwritten letter, 5 pages long, single-spaced, detailing all her thoughts and feelings. Parts of it sounded apologetic. She said she missed me. She said she wanted to repair our relationship. But then, on the last page, she wrote, "I hope you'll give me another chance at your next big event. I promise I'll be supportive this time." Even her apology was conditional. Still about what I could give her. Still about her being included in my life on her terms. I read the letter once. Filed it away in a drawer. Didn't respond. Daniel asked if I wanted to try to reconcile, to give her a chance. I thought about it seriously. Then I told him the truth. I gave her 32 years of chances. I spent 3 decades trying to earn her love, trying to be enough for her, trying to change myself to fit her expectations. I'm done. I have a mom now. Linda shows up for me. She calls to check on me. She celebrates my wins without comparing them to anyone else's. She loves me without conditions. That's what a mother does. Daniel understood. He always did. Holidays became something I actually looked forward to. Thanksgiving at Daniel's parents' house with all his extended family. Christmas mornings opening presents with people who were genuinely happy to see me. 4th of July barbecues where I wasn't being criticized or compared to my siblings. Aunt Helen became a regular presence in our lives. She visited every few months, and we talked on the phone weekly. She told me stories about Dad, keeping his memory alive. She became the family connection I'd always wanted, the one person who understood both where I came from and where I was going. My friend group expanded. Other teachers from school, parents of my students, people from our volunteer work at the community center. Our apartment hosted game nights and dinner parties. We built a community of people who chose each other, who showed up for each other, who celebrated each other's successes without jealousy. About 18 months after the wedding, I started a support group at school for students from difficult family situations, kids whose parents were critical, or absent, or manipulative, kids who felt like they didn't belong in their own homes. I shared my story with them in an age-appropriate way. I told them about learning to set boundaries, about understanding that you can't control how others treat you, but you can control how you respond, about building chosen families when biological ones fail you. The group grew. Other teachers referred students to it. Parents thanked me for giving their kids a safe space to talk about hard things. It became one of the most meaningful parts of my work. One day, a 15-year-old girl in the group stayed after to talk. She told me her parents constantly compared her to her older brother, made her feel like nothing she did was good enough. She asked me how I'd gotten through it. I told her the truth. I stopped waiting for them to see my worth. I started seeing it myself. And then I surrounded myself with people who saw it too. She cried. Then she thanked me. A year later, she brought me a card on the last day of school. Inside, she'd written, "You taught me that I don't have to earn love. Thank you for showing me what healthy family looks like." That card is still on my refrigerator. 2 years after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Daniel and I hadn't been actively trying, but we weren't preventing it either. When I saw the positive test, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried happy tears. We told Daniel's family that evening at Sunday dinner. Linda screamed with joy. George teared up. Emily immediately started planning the baby shower. The love and excitement in that room was overwhelming. We decided on names together. If it was a boy, we'd name him Robert, after my dad. If it was a girl, her middle name would be Helen, after my aunt. It was a girl. We named her Clara Helen. And when she was born, surrounded by Daniel's family and my chosen family, I held her in my arms and made her a promise. I promised her she'd grow up knowing she was loved unconditionally, that she'd never have to earn affection or approval, that she'd be celebrated for who she was, not compared to who she wasn't, that she'd know the difference between obligation and love, between biological family and real family. The generational cycle was broken. My daughter would never wonder if she was enough, because she was, simply by existing. Looking back on everything, from those painful weddings I wasn't invited to the phone call where I told Mom I'd miss her, to my own wedding day where I stood at the gate and chose myself, I realized the journey was necessary. I needed to be broken down to rebuild myself. I needed to lose the family I'd tried to fit into to find the family that actually fit me. I needed to say no to the wrong people to make room for the right ones. The life lesson isn't complicated, but it's profound. You can't force people to value you. You can spend decades trying to prove your worth to people who've already decided you don't measure up, and you'll never succeed, because the problem isn't you, it's them. But you can stop devaluing yourself to please them. You can stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces where you were never meant to belong. You can stop waiting for permission to live authentically. Standing up for yourself isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. Setting boundaries isn't punishment. It's protection. And saying no to people who hurt you isn't vindictive. It's necessary. The people who truly love you won't make you earn it. They won't dangle affection like a carrot on a stick, always just out of reach. They won't love you conditionally, based on your income or your weight, or your success, or your willingness to absorb their criticism without complaint. Real love shows up. Real love celebrates. Real love sees you and says, yes, this person exactly as they are. Sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves you. And sometimes saving yourself means walking away from the family you were born into. I didn't just say no to them that day on the phone with Mom. I said yes to myself, yes to happiness, yes to authenticity, yes to surrounding myself with people who actually wanted me there, yes to building a life on my terms. And that yes, that one word of affirmation to myself, made all the difference. I look at my life now, at Daniel, who loves me completely, at Clara, sleeping peacefully in her nursery surrounded by paintings I made for her, at Linda and George, who call themselves her grandparents with pride, at Aunt Helen, who flew in from Denver to meet her great niece, at Grace and Marcus, who are her godparents, at the community of love we've built. This is what winning looks like. Not revenge, not vindication, not watching my siblings suffer consequences, though some of them have. Winning is peace. It's waking up without that knot of anxiety in your stomach. It's going through your day without that voice in your head telling you you're not enough. It's surrounding yourself with people who add to your life rather than subtract from it. My siblings looked down on me and banned me from their weddings. They treated me like I was an embarrassment, like my life had less value because it looked different from theirs. They excluded me, mocked me, and expected me to keep showing up with a smile. So I stopped showing up. I said no. And that no freed me. Now I'm the one with a life filled with genuine love and joy. I'm the one with a partner who cherishes me. I'm the one with a child who will grow up secure in my love. I'm the one with a family that chose me and keeps choosing me every single day. I wouldn't change a thing. So here's what I want you to take from my story. If you're in a relationship, whether family or friendship or romantic, where you constantly feel like you're not enough, listen to that feeling. If you're always apologizing for who you are, always trying to earn love that should be freely given, always walking on eggshells to avoid criticism, something is wrong. You deserve to be loved as you are. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You deserve to take up space without apologizing for it. And if the people in your life can't give you that, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to say no. It's okay to choose yourself. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but it might also be the thing that saves you. I told my mom I'd miss her, and I do sometimes. I miss the mom I wish I'd had. The one who would have shown up for me, supported me, loved me without conditions. But I don't miss the mom I actually had. The one who chose appearances over integrity. The one who enabled my siblings' cruelty. The one who made me feel small for 32 years. Grief is complicated. You can mourn what should have been while accepting what actually was. You can forgive without reconciling. You can move forward without looking back. My daughter will never know her biological grandmother. She'll never know her aunts and uncle on my side. And that's sad, in a way. But she'll grow up surrounded by so much love from the family we've built that she'll never feel the absence. That's the gift I'm giving her. The gift of knowing she's wanted, celebrated, enough exactly as she is. And that's the gift I finally gave myself. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for seeing me. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Have you ever had to choose yourself over obligation? Have you ever walked away from people who were supposed to love you? If so, share your story in the comments. Let's build a community of people who understand that sometimes love means letting go. And if my story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone, I'd appreciate it if you'd like this video. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's struggling with family dynamics, who feels like they're not enough, who needs permission to choose themselves. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. I hope you find your people. I hope you find your peace. I hope you find the courage to say no to what hurts you, and yes to what heals you. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to be loved without conditions. Don't forget that. Take care of yourselves. Choose yourself. And remember that the best revenge is living well. Until next time.